Hello and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Layout Build series. Today we finalize our track plans and pretty much get all the track work done. I also add some buildings and kits, which includes this bridge for a small river scene that I'm excited to work on. As usual, there is lots to cover, so let's get started. We begin this episode with a quick unboxing. This package here comes from Walthers. A while back they had a sale on tank cars, so I decided to pick some up. These are some Walthers Proto 55-foot Trinity modified tank cars. If you did get a 3-pack, they were about $25 each, which is a really good deal. And of course with a Walthers order, you do get a cool little shopping catalog. I also ordered some more turnouts, rail joiners, a track cleaner, and some NCE stuff that will be used once we get to wiring. So the first thing on the to-do list is to redo the yard, as I mentioned in the last video. Here I'm gently pulling up the main line and the yard lead, since they will be slightly affected by the new yard configuration. Using the ruler, you can easily pull up those turnouts and the track. I'll be using a number 5 turnout instead of a number 6 on the start of my yard ladder. Anytime I redo my track, I peel up any leftover tacky glue just so things look cleaner. With just a couple of swaps of turnouts, the yard now looks a lot better. The tracks now are much closer together, 2 inches apart rail to rail to be exact. To help with that, I did use these 3D printed track spacers that I picked up on eBay. The 2 little grooves is where the head of each rail goes. These were 100% worth the purchase. I think they cost about $10 for a pack of 4, and if you plan to do a yard, these will help out a lot. The only tracks that need to be readjusted now are these 2 on the left. This is after one of them is complete, which is the track that I'm testing out the boxcar on. You always want to test out your track with a freight car just to make sure there's no issues. These little rail spacers especially came in handy when it came to the curved part of the yard. Next up is to get a couple of tracks laid that reach my engine shed. That will be done by using 2 number 6 turnouts. To accomplish that, I will have to cut and remove this stub-ended track. I think this is a much better use of space than what I had originally planned. I thought it would be a cool idea to let you guys choose what goes here. The first idea I have is a engine maintenance facility. That's where they will park and get serviced. Or should this be a tank car industry? Possibly a road to rail kind where the trucks pull up to load up on fuel. The option with the most votes added up in 1 week will be the one I will go with and build. I'll be looking forward to see which one wins, so make sure you comment down below which one I should go with. So here is the final look on this area with all the tracks adjusted and in their final place. I also added this track here, which leads to my future warehouse industry. The warehouse is a big building, so I made sure to leave enough room for it. This is that exact warehouse kit that I'm talking about, if you did not see my last video. To celebrate having a yard complete, I can now fill it up with my collection of rolling stock. It's now time to continue the track work. When I do track work, I do like to cut the ties off, but some have mentioned that it's not the only way to get rail joiners on, but for me, this is just how I prefer to do it. When it comes to soldering these pieces together, it does make it a little bit easier with that space, and sometimes if you are soldering, those really close ties can either warp or melt, so this way it's just a little bit easier. And of course we must have the regular guest appearance. This time he's cleaning himself as I do the track work. One thing that does help me with the curves is this small section of Atlas 22-inch radius curved track. Before I lay any flex track down, I like to mark some guidelines with it, so I have a good idea of what the minimum curve should look like. When you are using flex track to do this, you always want to have the movable rail on the inside of the curve. Here is how it looks after it's done, and I do actually redo this part a little bit, and you'll see that later on in the video. Next up is unboxing and building the girder bridge by Walthers. This is a somewhat smaller bridge at 50 scale feet, but it's perfect for what I'm going for. Here are the measurements if you do plan on getting one yourself. Thankfully, this should be one of the easier kits I've built on the channel, but of course we'll have to see. And here is a quick overlook of all the parts. The plan is to put the bridge right here just before the turnout. First and foremost, we must head to our little workstation to put that bridge together. These gray pieces won't be used since I'm not really extending my bridge or ballasting it. As with every kit build, it starts with cutting all those pieces off the sprues. Then sanding down any rough spots left over from cutting. I always like to use Tamiya extra thin cement. Hobby Lobby has these for about $5 a bottle. At this point I've only put together a couple of pieces to avoid getting things mixed up, but overall this is all the parts neatly laid out and ready to go. After about 2 hours we now have a complete bridge. For the price of this Walthers kit, the detail on it is pretty nice, especially all the little rivets in the metal. Usually I do like to paint my kits before I build them, but because this is all one color for the most part, I will be painting it after. One change I decided on was removing the bottom half of this support. This way I have a slight bit more clearance for my small river. And now it's time to get this bridge painted. I'll be using Rust-Oleum flat black to do so. The bridge idea was inspired by the small one located here in Loveland. Now obviously this bridge does look a little different, but size-wise it's pretty close, and the low clearance with water going under will fit my layout perfectly. This is the Great Western Railway, and you can see a couple of their engines parked in the distance. It's always nice to have a real-life example to help with your modeling. As I could see the light at the end of the tunnel for track work, I realized I did need a few more pieces of flex track to complete my layout. So that brings me to Hobbytown, USA. The flex track I need is right behind the glass for some reason, but they also got some other cool things behind the glass like these O-scale locomotives. They do also have a great selection of Woodland Scenics products, so we will probably be back when we start our scenery, which hopefully will be soon. The rolling stock selection is pretty good as well. I really wanted this Durango and Silverton train set, but I had to remind myself that money does not grow on trees. Now that we have all our needed track to complete the layout, we can now continue. As I did mention in the last episode, I will be reusing my Walthers rail-to-road aggregate transfer kit. But this kit isn't as simple as building it and placing it, and that is because the little part that goes underground. One thing I will be keeping in mind is the amount of track I have to shove cars to unload on the conveyor belt. On my last layout, I didn't have that much room, so I won't be making that mistake again. To start out, I'll be marking where my track is lightly with a pencil. I unpinned the track so I can now cut off the correct amount of railroad ties so it fits the kit. I have to take out a total of 9 ties. With the track back in place, I can mark exactly where that part of the kit will be. I place the kit over the markings that we just made, and I make some more markings to know exactly how much foam is needed to cut out for the underground part of it. I cut a clean rectangle in the foam, so when we go to pull it out, it doesn't rip anything more than that small section. Needle nose pliers is used to do the job. And this is a perfect example of why foam is such a great thing to have when building a layout. Just like that, we have a nice clean fit. As you can see, the base of the kit is bowed up a little bit, so we will have to weigh it down once it's glued. Now to outline the base of the kit to prepare for gluing. A light amount of tacky glue is applied. Then it's spread out with a scrap piece of polystyrene. We can now place the silos in its final spot. And the last piece of the puzzle is the track. Here is how it looks the following day. As you can tell, I have added a runaround near the industry, so operations are more fun in the future. Things are going as planned, and I'm happy with how things are turning out, but we still do have a little bit more track work to complete. The new bridge is technically a part of the track laying process, so that's our next thing to figure out. I have the perfect sized piece of flex track that will be used for the bridge, but we'll just be using the rails itself for the most part. I do actually end up removing those railroad ties on each end after I glue the rails down. Tacky glue will be used to secure the rails to the bridge, and any excess is scraped away with a hobby knife. I took off those railroad ties and tested the track with a covered hopper to make sure it's all good. Some bottles of paint are placed on the rails to make sure they don't move and that they're flat. Before I do cut away any foam, we must measure how low the bridge will need to go to line up with the existing track. I also sketched out what not to cut with a Sharpie. The solid black and line dashed parts will not be removed. I'll be using this photo here to help as a reference as I do this. Then I mark where the rest of the river goes to help with removing the right amount of foam. Since I now have a sort of template to go by, I can now start cutting and removing the foam. After some time, we now have a rough cutout of our river. I can now test my bridge on the supports I've cut and carved from the foam. As you can see, it's not perfect yet, but with a little bit of TLC, we can definitely make this work. And when I say TLC, I mean DAP putty and polystyrene. This side will have a piece on top and on the front to not only help with aesthetics, but to help slightly raise the bridge a couple of millimeters since I cut it ever so slightly too low. I also had to add a small piece here because I cut it at a slight angle. Once that front piece of polystyrene is added, it now looks a lot cleaner. I did the same with the other side, but used more spackling to cover some of those imperfections. It is messy, but this is pre-sanding, so just keep that in mind. On video, it doesn't really seem like I did sand it, but I did, and now I'm painting it with some country gray paint. Things are now looking a lot better after a few coats. I have also carved a little bit more foam around these barriers after a look at my references. Since the glue is dry, I added some new railroad ties back on each end of the track. I've also got the track laid for the curve leading up to the bridge. This is how the bridge looks in place. So far I'm happy with the way it's turning out, and I honestly had no idea how I was going to do this, so I apologize if the progress seemed jumpy. I was just going with the flow and rolling with the punches. Either way, I'm excited to have a proper bridge on the layout, even if it's just a small one. This will most likely be the first scene that I work on, but we'll have to see. So in the title or description you might see that I mentioned completing the track work or something along those lines, and technically that won't be true, more like 98%. And that's because I do have this small little piece to add, but for the most part, our track work is complete. And in the next episode, it will definitely be done, and hopefully we have trains running in the next episode. So that is the goal. Remember to comment down below on which idea I should go with, the engine facility or the tank car industry. So as always, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys in the next episode.